Hey, it's Tom Cassidy here. This is the Reasonable Wealth Project. We are just launching week 5, starts tomorrow. And week 5 is, again, a movement back to the thinking realm, the realm of the metaphysical. And it's all about the fact that thoughts actually create things, and that creating is what you should be really doing. And that's creating is more important than waiting. So this is kind of, well, last week we were focusing on the importance of taking action, acting now. This week we're focusing on going back to the metaphysical plane and the power and the unbelievable facility that you've got in every single one of you to actually create through thought exactly what you want in life. Now, I could go into all the science behind it. There is a lot of science behind it, but I'm just going to ask you to say, do all that science research if you like. That's up to you. By now, you're either in this program and loving it because it's awesome and you're getting tremendous results, or you're not, in which case, why are you still doing it? You know, you shouldn't be here. If you honestly think that, if your faith is such that you're already looking for me to prove these things, or you're still looking for me to prove these things, then really this isn't the place for you. You should know by the evidence that we've got in all the groups and all the activity, and you should know by what I'm saying that it's right. Having said that, there is an awful lot of science behind it, so I'm just going to give you a little bit about it. First of all, it's beyond debate that when you actually think, what you do have is you are creating an energy pattern. Now, it's what you've got that actually does this is it's basically electricity on a simple level. It's okay, very low current electricity, but it is currents. It can be measured in the laboratory that when you think, you actually generate a current of electricity. Now, anytime an electrical current is generated, the laws of physics says that since electricity is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, says that whenever electric charges move, they generate a corresponding magnetic, electromagnetic radiation wave that goes off, and it has a magnetic effect. And this is what we use for transformers, it's what we use for generators, it's what we use for motors. It's that link between the magnetic field and the electric field, and in specific, a movement, a relative movement between the two. So we have a magnet and we have a wire, and we move the two of them kind of together, and what happens is that electricity flows in that wire. We have a magnet and we have a wire, and we don't move them, but we pass a current through them. So we make, through an external battery or power source, we make a current flow in the wire, and the magnet moves, or there creates an effect on the magnet. So this is the interesting one for us. When there is a current flowing anywhere, there is a magnetic effect of it. In your brain, you have currents flowing, so there's a magnetic effect. So that's the first thing, that there exists an influence that is greater than just what is enclosed by your head. There is a greater influence than your thoughts. Now you might say, well, it's not very big. Fine, fair enough. Okay, the next thing is, if you have a magnetic field that is moving, like I said earlier, a magnetic field that is moving, it will cause, and a wire, it will cause a current to flow. So we've just created a magnetic field that goes out there, and then if we have someone else's brain actually in the region of the magnetic field we've just created, that magnetic field that we created, which goes out to infinity, will cause a flow of electricity in someone else's brain. And that flow of electricity in someone else's brain will actually also be corresponding to a thought. So basically, you can create, and the thinking behind this in a more tangible way would be telepathy. And then you have the ability to have an effect that is larger than yourself through your thoughts, and to have those thoughts actually travel through the universe and be intercepted and downloaded, so to speak, by someone else's similar to brain functioning capacity. Now, that's just one thing. So there is certainly, without doubt, an influence. You know, whenever there is energy, there's without doubt an influence. Now, the next question is, if you think about something specifically, you're more likely to bring it into your life. Because, okay, first of all, it's possible for you for your thoughts to exist beyond you. and not just, you know, in electronic communication or books or diaries or anything like that. It's possible for your thoughts to actually exist throughout all of space. That's the first thing. The next thing is, if you think of a particular thing, you can actually create that particular thing. So you can create it in thoughts in someone else. But this is the next thing. This is where you might have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. But if you want to get something specifically, then you'll be more effective if you think about that thing specifically. And this is the phenomenon called resonance. And it's the same phenomenon that says that things have a natural frequency. And the classic example of this is a wine glass. It has a natural frequency. If you ping it, it will give off a note. Now, if you could so generate that same note externally through an opera singer's voice or through a mechanical piece of equipment, you could actually generate those sound waves. The sound waves would come to the glass, and the glass will start to vibrate if you get the frequency right. So external energy can get the glass to actually start basically moving backwards and forwards. We call it vibrating, really, through resonance. Now, if I get the frequency wrong, it has zero impact. If I get the frequency wrong, but turn it up really, 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 really loud, it makes no impact whatsoever, because the frequency of vibration of the source and the receiver are different. They won't work at all. If I get the frequency exactly right, so the frequency of the glass is exactly matched by the sound that I'm making, I don't even have to have it particularly loud. I can just get it at exactly the right frequency, and bingo, it'll actually vibrate so much that it'll smash. We know this when we're pushing kids in a park, in a swing. You know, if you push your kid at the swing at the wrong time, you don't push it exactly at the the apex when it comes back, right at the end, it's very difficult. You know, if you try, it's not going to work very well. But you don't need hardly any effort at all if you push it exactly the right point to get the kid to start swinging. So the point about this is that the thoughts that you have excuse me. Thinking too powerfully there. The thoughts that you have will have a natural frequency, and the things that you are thinking about will have the same natural frequency of the thoughts when you think about those things. So if you want specific things, when you think about them, you will start to bring them into your life. You'll start to send out those kind of electromagnetic bits of energy, those waves, which will then resonate with the things that you're thinking about. Now, they will resonate always with whatever you're thinking about, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So it makes sense, obviously, to think more about what you want than about what you don't want. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to explain it. There's a quantum analogy which says that, when you're doing an experiment, you actually influence it, and when you look to measure something, you see it. When you look to measure something else, you see that as well. Okay, when we talk about the wave-particle duality, look, I could find a million different ways to explain this. Well, I could find a handful of different ways to explain this, but ultimately it won't make any difference unless you've got the faith to actually do something about it. You actually have to try it. You actually have to say, well, if thoughts were things, and I could bring these things into my life by thinking about them, in the physics of what Tom is saying, if the physics was true, then why wouldn't I just test it? Why wouldn't I actually think about some things and see if I could manifest them, see if I could materialize them? And this is exactly what this whole program is all about, of course. It's the fundamental tenet of this program that thoughts are things, and that thinking about stuff can bring it into reality. That's not the only thing. Thinking is just half of it. Action is half of it as well. But this week, I want you to be really focusing on extending your metaphysical powers to actually really practice thinking about exactly what you want. And, when we talked about the script and noticing and all that sort of stuff, and say being aware and having your awareness, that's all fine. Ultimately, what you're going to get into your life is going to be a direct result of the energy that you put focused into a particular direction. And the reason why you need to get good at this is because if you don't get really good at thinking about what you want for most of the time, you will find it so difficult. It'll take too long to get the things that you really want into your life, so you'll give up. So this week, the actual chapter that you're focusing on is chapter 4, which is called The First Principle in the Science of Getting Rich, and it's a big chapter. It's a hefty chapter, so it's just one chapter for this week. Now, you could argue that why didn't we start with the first principle of the science of getting rich? Because, you know, that would be sensible to start with the first one. Well, the reason is it's a little bit difficult. It's a little bit esoteric for most people to get their heads round. So what I suggested was starting with things that you can readily understand, grasp, and can take action on for the first few weeks. And now we're into week 5. This is what we're going to be doing. So some of the key points in this chapter, the first principle in the science of getting rich. Right. So Wattles uses some fairly obscure and some fairly dense language. So I'm going to go through a couple of the key things. I mean, obviously, the key thing is think about what you want, not about what you don't want. That's it. But you thinking about it without the faith that it's going to work is not going to be very effective. So you have to have an element. You have to be able to put your script in its place and say, look, I know what you're saying. I know you're saying that this is bullshit. I know that you're saying this can't possibly happen. But I'm going to act as if I think it could happen, and I'm going to have the faith that it could happen. Because even if the physics of it isn't true, a lot of people that do it get great results. So look, you've got two types of people in the world. You know, people that really think this sort of stuff is true, and they act on it, and they bring great things into their lives. Just recently, Matthew McConaughey was talking about he won an Oscar for something, and his speech was so much about belief and faith and gratitude and all these metaphysical things that we talk about. People that don't get much happening in their lives, they actually don't believe this sort of stuff. So there's people on the one hand who really believe it, and they've got lots of great things happening in their lives. And there's other people that don't really believe it, and guess what? They haven't got so many great things happening. And you could argue, well, they're not using it, so they're not going to get what they want. No, they are using it. They get exactly what they're thinking about the most. Who gets sick the most? The person who thinks they're healthy and imagines that they're healthy and expects to be healthy and keeps going, yeah, I'm awesome, life's amazing, I'm just so healthy, I never get sick. Or the people that talk about being sick all the time. I never get sick. Never. I just don't get sick. There's no point. You just slow me down. It's just a waste of time being sick. Why would I be sick? It's crazy. I never think that I'm going to be sick. I'm always astonished if something weighs me down, and then I put it down to, the fact that, I probably stayed up really late doing these crazy intercontinental calls till like 4 in the morning and stuff like that, and not getting enough sleep, or not quite eating well enough, or not perhaps getting enough movement, and so on and so forth. But basically, I haven't had to take a day off work for over 10 years. In fact, the last time I remember taking a day off work is because I got hammered drunk. I was working at a school in Hong Kong, and I had some friends over from England, and we went out on a Wednesday night, and we got absolutely hammered drunk. Got home at about 5 o'clock in the morning. I thought, there's absolutely no chance I got it getting into school, so I actually pulled a sickie the next day. That was it. I was ill in West Texas in fact, I've been ill in West Texas a couple of times. Now, it might be that I'm sensitive to all the oil and gas coming up from the gas fields out there. I don't really know. But basically, in my normality existence, just never get sick. Never get sick. Just don't do it. But guess what? I never expect to. And then I find some people, not so much my friends, because I don't want to hang around with people who are ill all the time. It just brings me down. But guess what? The people that are ill all the time, they're talking about it. And these people that aren't very successful and don't get anything that they want in their life to come to them, they're going, yeah, of course they're talking about it, because they're ill all the time. They're ill all the time, so they're talking about it all the time. But we know they're talking about it all the time, so they're hearing it all the time, so they're thinking about it all the time, so they're creating it all the time in their lives. That's what we know. We know it to be the truth. At least we're in week 5 now. If we don't know, go back and listen to the other videos. Go back and look at some of the results we've been getting. Okay, so even if you didn't find the physics compelling, even if you didn't find the things that I'm saying sensible, even if you didn't have enough faith to actually believe it and start acting on it, just decide who you want to align with. Do you want to align with the people here who believe it and get great things happening in their lives, or do you want to align with the people here who don't believe it and they don't expect much to happen? They expect to be miserable and not to get great things, and as a result they get not very great things. Now, What would prove that it wouldn't work would if people that up here really believed that it was going to happen, really believed that they were going to get great things, acted giving value in such a way in accordance with their faith and in accordance with what they believed and what they thought about. You know, ultimately you can't shortcut the system, you can't cheat the universe, you have to actually give the value as well. But they really believed that it's going to be possible. They really absolutely believed it. Now, if people really believed it, acted as if it was going to work and it didn't work, then and they ended up miserable and unhappy, then that would be a disproof. Or people really expected things to go badly, and expected to be miserable, but ended up really happy and awesome. You know, it's like, if either of those things happened, then it would prove that this wouldn't work, or this whole approach doesn't work. That it would prove it. But so far, guess what? It works for everybody. If you're positive and you're thinking about what you want, you get it. If you're negative and you're thinking about what you don't want, you get it. So never ever think of yourself as unhealthy. Never think of yourself as recovering from previous sickness. Never ever think of yourself as having been weak, having been poor. Never ever think of any of those things. Because the more you think of those things, the more energy you give to them. The more your energy you're giving to them, the more you're sending out this electromagnetic radiation in all directions. So always think about how awesome you are. Think about how amazing life is. Think about how getting everything you want is going to be great and is great now. And feel everything and all this exciting stuff, because you will get whatever you think about the most. That's it. You know, it will actually happen. You will actually get whatever you think about the most. So let's go to the some of the things in the first principles in chapter 4. Wattle says, thought is the only power which can produce tangible riches from a formless substance. The stuff from which all things are made is a substance which thinks, and the thought of form in this substance produces a form. Right, so just that paragraph, you're going, what the hell, man, what's all this about? But you know what? You talk to anybody who's relatively successful, you know, very successful in fact. You talk to someone like Buckminster Fuller, he just believed that our brains were receiving stations for the wisdom of the universe. He was saying that intuition, your intuition is the most important thing. And if you're open and you are willing to accept your role as he called it like this, a sort of a local problem solver. Basically, it was an information gatherer and problem solver. That was the function of humans in the universe, to actually help the disentropic process of all energy spreading out in all directions. You know, planets try and take that disorganized energy and turn it into life, which is more organized energy. Humans are the pinnacle of that, because we've got the metaphysical capacity to actually get intuition, get all these ideas, turn all these great ideas into value, and make, you know, an incredibly far better living. I wouldn't say society, but living system for everybody to include. And you say, well, it's not good. Well, sure it is. Ask anybody, when would they rather be alive? Now, when most people are doing really well. Most people can eat avocados, have them delivered to their door any time of the year. Most people, most of us can, an awful lot of us can. Or 100 years ago, where only 1% of the population of the world could even, you know, live relatively well. Or 1,000 years ago, when it's probably 0.001%, you know, or 10,000 years ago, when it might be sort of one person, the king of the tribe might be okay, or the pharaoh might be okay, and the rest were kind of slaves, basically. So, of course, it's, you know, without a shadow of doubt, it's the best time to ever possibly live. And if you're not sure about that, go back in history, find a time that you'd like to live, set up a hangout with me, and go through the 10 reasons why you'd like to live in a particular time, based on science, based on the evidence, not based on a romantic, idealized notion of what it was like, based on you being an average person at that time compared to being an average person now, and we'll go through it, because you may be right, it's possible, but it is difficult to understand that the universe is just made out of thought, but I'm not asking you to really be able to prove that. I'm asking you to say, well, if it was like that, what would it mean as a result? Well, you would be able to pick up the intuitions of the universe, you'd be able to send out your own ideas, and you would be able to communicate to other things. And those things that you're communicating to, whether it's people or events or places or material stuff, would come to you in direct accordance with the laws of physics, laws of resonance, and that similarity of the energy that you've got and the energy that they've got. that would happen. All right. Okay, so I'm going to skip through some of these things because it's a bit much, but I actually believe that it's I believe that it's true. I just think that it's a difficult way to say it. You know, there's this thing called dark energy which we don't know about. I mean, it needs to exist in order for the universe to work with our mathematical models, but we can't really put our finger on it. We can't really find it. We don't know what really is going on with it. But this kind of idea that the intelligence is in everything is one. I'm just going to give you an example. You know, everyone seems to think that there is a very clear difference between things that are alive and things that aren't alive. But actually, that's completely untrue. The only difference between an inanimate object, like say a computer, or a stone, or a table, and an animate object, like a human, or a leaf, or an insect, is time. That's the only difference. And you could argue complexity. There's a, you know, people say, oh yeah, but animate objects are alive. They've got like a soul and stuff like that. Well, everyone talks about this mythical idea of 21 grams being the weight of a soul. Well, that was like one science experiment that one guy did, and it's like hugely flawed, and it wasn't even consistent. So, you know, the idea that there is any difference in weight or physical difference between something which is alive and something which is dead is farcical. It's just not true at all. The only difference is metaphysical. But basically, looking at the things like, say, a leaf and a stone, the only difference between those things is time. They are both organized energy. One is organized energy over a much smaller time scale than the other. It changes in a much smaller time window. The leaf will be composed, get organized and get disorganized, associate and disassociate in a far shorter time scale than the stone. Has the stone always been like that? No. People say, well, it's inanimate. No, the molecules that comprise the stone and the atoms that comprise the leaf are identical. They're the same atoms. They're the same atoms of carbon, of hydrogen, of whatever. You know, if it's I don't know what the stone's made out of, but the point is, it's the same. It's the same fundamental atoms. An atom of hydrogen is the same, whether it's in water, or whether it's in muscle, or whether it's in wood, or whether it's part of a tree, or whether it's part of carbon dioxide, which everyone says is inorganic. The actual atoms are the same. And the only difference is that over the time scale that we observe stuff, we don't see the changes in stone, but we see the changes in leaves. So we think there's something magical about that. No, the same intelligence that is in humans, is in leaves. And the same intelligence that's in leaves is in stones. You say, well, how can that be? The intelligence is in the laws of physics. That is the intelligence. That is the intelligence of the universe. And the intelligent laws of physics, designed as such to be, I won't say designed by an individual, I don't want people to go a bit crazy or anything like that, but they have been designed so that they are interaccommodative. So they all mesh together and they work perfectly. And those same laws of physics give rise to the stone, give rise to the leaf, give rise to the human. It's the same intelligence. So when the idea that the whole universe is made out of the formless stuff, you know, that is the way that all things were created. We live in a thought world which is part of a thought universe. You know, you can totally understand that when you think that actually all the atoms are the same. The intelligence is the laws of physics. The same laws of physics created the stone, created the leaf, created the light bulb, created the wall, created me. Anyway, so there you go. And you know what? Use your own discernment. If you don't think this is going to work, if you think this is something that can't work for you, don't use it. Go and do something else. You know, find some other way to influence the world, because it's absolutely okay if you don't want to believe this. Right. Okay. So this is a really important one. So the thought, the form that you have, it causes the creation of the form, and always, he's saying, or at least generally, along the lines of growth and action already established. So if you think about getting something awesome in your life, it's not going to happen by you just going, oh yeah, you know, like a 3D printing machine, and so I'm just going to think this, and oof, there it is, fantastic, a Ferrari, wonderful. No, it won't happen like that at all. It will happen along the lines of transmission, along the lines of growth. The lines of growth and action and transmission that are already well established, whether they're through society, through business, through politics, through nature. And ultimately, Everyone says stuff is either natural or unnatural. Oh, you know, this isn't right, you know, blah, blah, blah. Look, nature does not allow things that are unnatural to actually happen. So there won't be an element with, you know, 300 protons and no neutrons. That is unnatural. It doesn't happen. But anything that is permitted by nature, anything that exists that we can observe, that we, you know, whether or not we don't like it, it doesn't fit in with our culture or our code, we say, oh, that's unnatural to do that. You know, anything that actually is supported by nature is natural. So it is natural for humans to fly. We get in an airplane, we fly from one place to another, going through the air. That is perfectly natural. So it's not natural for man to fly. It is, because man has used his metaphysical powers and ingenuity working on the formless substance to actually turn all this stuff, organize it in a different way so that man can defy gravity and fly through the air. That is perfectly natural because it has come from nature and been organized in that way. So anything that exists is natural. Right, so you can't, here's a good one. No thought of form can be impressed upon original substance without causing the creation of the form. You know, like, you can't think about something without actually creating it. So don't think about what you don't want. Don't do it. How many times in the last week have you focused and thought, oh, yeah, that's not going to work that well. I'm not sure about that. Oh, I'm a little bit uncertain. Oh, I don't really know. You've just created all this uncertainty and this not really knowing just out there. On this point, I'm going to say the kind of the focus on this, you know, thoughts create things, but creating is better than waiting. What's that all about? That's all about the sausage machine. It's all about what you do. Creating is much more useful for you than waiting. You are actually creating all the time. And it's the fundamental thing that we humans are incredibly good at because we've got metaphysical powers. Animals, bless them, aren't really good at creating anything else other than themselves. You know, some of them might build some dens and things like that, but animals cannot use metaphysical powers in the same way that humans can. Humans, with our brain function as it has been designed, has got us to a state where literally we can create phenomenal things just as a result of thought, of conception. Okay, right, this is interesting. This is really, really interesting because I'm going to skip through to this here. There's so much in this chapter, it's incredible, but I just do want to say this, you know. Yeah, this is the thing. Right. Every man has the natural and inherent power to think what he wants to think, but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearances. To think according to appearances is easy. You look at something, you see it, you think of it. Right? But to think the truth, regardless of appearance, is laborious. To think that the atoms that make this computer, that made that microphone, that made that light bulb, that made the energy that's coming to us are all the same atoms. That's the truth of it. And that's laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work man is ever called to perform. This is the hardest thing you're ever going to do. There is no, this is one of my favorite lines in the book, there is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. Wow. So don't expect you to be thinking about what you want and not what you don't want easily, because what you don't want is probably much easier to think about. Why? Because it's probably all around you. You probably look at the car that you've got, or look at the house that you're in, or look at the girlfriend or husband you've got, and yeah. No, joking aside, it's much easier for you to just look at stuff and then create that thought. It's probably a lot harder to look at what you've got around you and think about what you want. So that's why he says it's the hardest work in the world. This guy was, he was on it. He was flipping. He knew what was going on. Wattles, blimey. Okay, and this is a lovely last bit that I'm going to close on here. Right. To think health when surrounded by the appearance of disease, or to think riches when in the midst of the appearance of poverty, requires power. But he who acquires this power becomes a mastermind. He can conquer fate. He can have what he wants. So, you know, it's worth it to get good at this, because you will become a mastermind and you'll be able to conquer fate and get what you want. And this power can only, he goes on to say, this power can only be acquired by getting hold of the basic fact which is behind all appearances. And that fact is that there is one thinking substance from which and by which all things are made. This same thinking substance, not a God that is creating everything, but we are this thinking substance, this metaphysical power, this energy that's in us is in everything, from which and by which all things are made. Then we must grasp the truth that every thought held in this substance becomes a form, and that man can so impress his thoughts upon it as to cause them to take form and become visible things. Blah, blah, blah. So, and he goes on, he goes to talk through the syllabus, you know, there is the thinking stuff, blah, blah, blah. So, this is, well, I guess I keep saying I'm going to end, but I am now. Do not ask why these things are true, nor speculate as to how they can be true. Simply take them on trust. And this is what I'm asking you to do. And you could say, well, I'm not going to do it. That's fine. If you're not going to do it, it's okay. You know what? It doesn't bother me in the slightest. You know, whether people say something is true or not doesn't affect whether it is true. Whether or not someone believes something doesn't affect whether it's helpful. And it certainly doesn't affect whether it's helpful to me and to all the people who aren't going to believe it. And people say, well, I don't know, you know, oh, I just don't know whether I can believe this. It sounds too good to be true. I just don't know whether I can believe it. Well, I'm going to take you back to the diagram of the wheel, the reasonable wealth 13 by 4. What is the fundamental central tenet, the most important paradigm of the whole program? Look, helpful is better than true. Whether something is helpful or not is a far more important paradigm than whether something is true or not, or whether or not something is true. That's a better way to say it. Yeah. So this is it. If something is helpful, use it. If it isn't, don't use it. Don't bother yourself. Don't let the script get you over whether it's true or not. Because being true is not a helpful paradigm in itself. So whether something is helpful is a more helpful paradigm. So it's like you could say it's a circular argument. It doesn't matter, because I'm going to use something that is helpful regardless of whether or not it's true. If I know that something is totally not true, I might find it harder to use it, even if it's helpful. You know, somebody finds out that his wife's been cheating on him or something like that. He knows that's true, but he knows that she hasn't been faithful, so he knows that she's no longer part, so that's not true anymore. But he might not find it helpful to think of that. It's going to be challenging. If you absolutely know something is not true, it's going to be challenging to believe in it because it's helpful. But I guarantee that no one can prove any of these things that I'm saying to you are not true. You can't prove that they're not true. So if you given that you can't prove that they're not true, and it's much more helpful to believe that they are true, or it's helpful and to believe them and to do so, would you choose to say, well, you know what, I can't actually fundamentally really believe that it is true. I know Tom can't, and I know no one can prove that they aren't, but I need to prove that they are true before I can actually act on them. That's fine. If that's what you'd never choose that. You'd never choose that. Just know it's your script, and that's fine. Either move on and just start following this approach because it's helpful, or don't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. It genuinely doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I would love everyone to think like this. That's why we're doing this, because we want to make the proof more evident. That's why I want to do this longitudinal study, because I want there to be more science in this than there currently is. But you know what? Whether or not an individual like you listening to this actually takes action or not is irrelevant to me. It's none of my business. My job is to keep doing it myself, believing it in myself, and then showing people do it if they want, you know. Come to the banquet. I'm going to be the example. Anyway, this is fun. I could do this all night. This is just great fun. But I'm not going to. I'm going to see if there's any questions. I did pop it open for questions. I don't normally expect them to happen on the first Hangout. What I'll do is I'll do a question and answer in a couple of days. And of course, any individuals, get in touch with me if you want to do a one-to-one on any of these aspects, because I think this will be one that really a lot of people will, they'll have that cognitive dissonance. They'll say, I want this to be true, but I can't really believe that it is. I really, really want this to be true because I know it would be wonderful. I know it would be helpful if I could believe this, but I'm not really sure that I can. So you'll have that cognitive dissonance all the time. Now, what will happen with most people is they either collapse onto one or the other. They either collapse onto, yeah, okay, I can't believe it, so I'm not going to do anything about it. Or they collapse onto, well, it's helpful. I'm just saying, what is going to be more valuable to you in the future, to follow the paradigm of whether something is helpful or not, or to follow the paradigm of whether something is true or not? So contact me if you want a one-on-one on this, because this will be wonderful to do a one-on-one at least every day for the next week, unless my wife has her baby, of course. Well, our baby, hopefully. Who knows? Right, okay, that's me done. Have a wonderful, incredible week applying this. It's chapter 4. It's the first principle of the science of getting rich, that thoughts create things, and it's much better for us to be creating than sitting around waiting. Oh, we've got a question. No, we haven't got a question. We've got, we just got a thank you. John has said, cheers. Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay, well, I'll let you go. Have a wonderful week. And as I say, I'll be in touch over the next few days on all sorts of question and answer, because there's going to be some people that have some questions. This is a big one. This is one that your script will have a field day with if you let it. But you would never choose to have that, because you'd choose to say, well, okay, I'm going to accept this. Boof. Go to work. Get cracking. All right. That's really done. Bye.